When people ask about my self-healing journey, they always ask me sort of the same thing when it comes to abandonment issues. How does it sort of affect my life now? Well, it's simple, really. That's because of how veridical I am. Now, most people don't stay in my life because of how sort of veridical I am. And it's all to do with the lies and the manipulation tactics, survival tactics is to basically lie and manipulate. And unfortunately, that's because the abandoners are liars and manipulators. So you will tend to become like them in order to survive. So what happens is when you sort of self-heal and you do all of the work and the shadow work and you heal your abandonment issues, you're not going to keep those people in your life because they don't resonate with you anymore. They don't resonate with your self-healing. They don't resonate with your growth. Everybody, I'm Dr. Karen Mikowski, aka Butterfly Karen. Welcome. Welcome to today's table chat. Now, this is an interesting one because today I'm going to be talking about abandonment issues and how it can, one, not only affect your life, but two, what you will become if you don't basically heal. And it can be a lifelong sort of, it's a progress. It's a process that's, good Lord, yeah, it can take a lifetime to sort of like heal from it. I mean, if you think about the different types of people that suffer from sort of abandonment issues, you're talking about people who suffer from traumas, everything from like borderline personality disorders and everything, child neglect, child abuse, even right down to like people who suffer from, in divorces. Infidelity is a big one that causes that. But I mean, there's many more, but when you think about, when I think, well, not so much anybody else, but when I think about social construct, it's a big problem. And that to me is what that social construct causes a lot of people to suffer from, like low self-esteem, no self-esteem. When you have that combination, then you're easily susceptible to being abandoned. Now, first things first, I am not a therapist or a psychiatrist or a psychologist. Whenever I do my videos or anything like this, I am literally discussing my own personal experiences, what I've experienced. Now, for me, it's all about, I like to sort of give like spiritual counseling, because that level of counseling is all to do with soul and how all of these sort of traumas and what we deal with, and abandonment issues is just one of them, how it affects the soul. And I'm a doctor of the soul, so I understand that side of everything. But I speak only from experience and how I've healed, what type of therapy I've had. I mean, I haven't had any therapy. But that's just me. If you suffer from traumas, you need therapy. You're going to have therapy depending on what you're traumatized by. If you have borderline personality disorder, you're going to need to see a therapist, or, depending on the level of care you need. Even like right down to like abuse, any type of abuse. If therapy is out there, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychotherapist or anything like that. But I do remember a time I went with my ex-husband. We went to sort of see a psychologist to deal with like marital counseling, that sort of thing. And it didn't work because obviously two sides, both people need to be wanting to fix the problem. and only one side wanted to. So obviously it wasn't going to work. But after that, I've always sort of like, for me personally, I'm not speaking for anybody else. That's what we need to understand. I'm literally talking and speaking and explaining what it's been like for me growing up. And you trust me, I'm not a professional victim. I don't like that whole professional victim mentality, because that causes abusers. That if you don't control and manage that, and you continue to go through life as a professional victim, you'll end up becoming an abuser. So you become the very thing that hurt you. And I've seen that over and over and over again. I have not stopped seeing that in people because they don't get help or they don't heal. For me, I understand abandonment. I've not stopped. I've been dealing with abandonment issues since I was a child. I've literally just spent years finally healing my childhood traumas. And one of those traumas includes abandonment issues. And that's kind of what it causes anyway. So for me to heal, I had to go right to the root of the problem. Understanding the root of the problem of being abandonment is nothing to do with you. It's to do with the abandoners. It's to do with the people. And this can start in your familial conditioning. And it starts very early. Your familial, who's raising you. Then you have to go to, when you start going to school, then you're surrounded by other children. Then you're surrounded by people that are educating you. So there's, again, when you're talking about the culture of cultural conditioning and things like this, that can play a part in it too. And when you start interacting with children at a young age, the abandonment issues can start there, because if you're constantly rejected by other kids or you're bullied, that's going to cause a childhood trauma, and that is going to make you feel abandoned because nobody wants to associate. So there's so many reasons why children, I personally believe the abandonment starts in childhood anyway. And then if you go home, like for me, I've got like siblings, but I knew what it was like to be casted off and abandoned by my own siblings. So I was a very lonely, independent child, even though I could interact and I did have friends and I did from time to time. But whenever there was a need of a punch bag, for other kids, I was always that punch bag. So I was only invited depending on the moods of the kids. But again, and that sounds really sad to admit, but that's one of the things, like, depending on if they're all in a playful, happy-go-lucky mood, it would be a great interaction. If they were all feeling a bit like trickster, or wanted to start bullying, I'd always look for a little scapegoat, and that would not, unfortunately, be me. Now, I'm sure that resonates with a lot of people growing up. So I knew really then, I mean, I was different anyway. So that didn't make it easier on me, being completely different. And you need to understand what I do. So just you can go to my website or learn more about me to understand why I'm different. But that would be the perfect recipe for a group of people, like a group of children, to go, well, you're not like us, so we need to treat you differently. They don't know what they're doing. It's just the way it is. But that will make you a little target or a bit of a scapegoat or a little punch bag. So that sort of doesn't, but that constant, well, you can play with us today, but we're rejecting you tomorrow. So I think a lot of abandonment issues can start with rejection. So I remember that as a kid very well. And, you can either grow out of that, or you become I remember you become a bit of a bully because it's all you know. So I remember going into right through junior school, still being the punch bag, depending on the moods of the kids. And that's just the way it was. But once I got into high school, I knew I was starting to become like the bullies, and I was starting to sort of act out that way. And I'm like, okay, this is not, but I had empathy. I felt guilt. I had compassion. So when I realized, when I see that person crying, that I just made that person cry, I don't like that. So that's where I realized, no. And then I'd watch other people bullying the same people. And when you're following an example too, it's so easy to get drawn into that. So this is where it starts from in childhood. And then I realized, oh, hang on a minute. I'm not bullying that. Then I started to beat up the bullies because I was always for the underdog anyway. And the reason I was always for the underdog is because I was one of the underdogs. So that's kind of how it starts. And so, yeah, I do remember trying to fit in and thinking it was cool to do the same as what was being done to me. But then I remember thinking, this is not nice. This is, why would I do this? So you can learn. You do know as a teenager. And I soon snapped out that phase didn't last very long at all. And then I would make myself more of a target to the bullies because I was fighting the bullies back so they could leave those other people alone that weren't sort of as strong as me. So I remember going through that in high school. And yeah, and so you can slowly grow out of that childhood abandonment issues, but that doesn't mean it's still there. Like you're not healed. You just learn to sort of adjust it to a different way. Now, as I got it, but then again, I was sort of raised in a very abusive sort of a domestic sort of violent household anyway. So there was always a lot of rejection. Again, depending on the people's moods in the household would determine what sort of day you would have. So you're walking on eggshells. And so for me to have that sort of, so you can feel abandoned. And again, it's the rejection that seeps in that causes the abandonment issues. So you're dealing with that on top of the other sort of trauma too. And then you never really feel insecure. So again, that's to do with the familial conditioning around you in your household. And then, so now you're not just dealing with the sort of abandonment issues, but you're also dealing with the other sort of trauma that's with it. And then that's basically, that becomes your energy signature, because that's all you know. You don't really know much different. And then as you sort of you're growing up and you start getting into relationships, you're attracting, you've got low self-esteem. And, I always say children are usually abandoned by parents that are not even there. So there's the abandonment in one way. There's so many different areas of why you will be dealing with abandonment issues. Or one parent's not there. One parent leaves you to let your grandparents raise you or something like that. That happens a lot too. Or you just basically get put into the childcare system and things like this. So there's major abandonment issues for individual people, but the principle is still the same. You can heal from it, but depending on if there's other traumas or anything else going on, then you need extra help. You need a different type of help. But I could have quite easily gone down those routes where, okay, well, I can just like numb the pain. Like I watch people do the same. You don't realize until you get into adulthood that how many people around you are dealing with abandonment issues, because again, a lot of it's to do with social conditioning too. When you look at the social constructs of how we're programmed, you've got to remember what's being fed into the brains of people. So they're trying to break down these family units. Well, what happens when you break down the family unit? You cause a destruction in that unit. And so now those children are going to get, there's issues. You've created issues in the family unit. So if the father leaves, the children are going to feel abandoned. If the mother leaves, the children are going to feel abandoned. Or the parent, either one of the adults is going to feel abandoned because of the breakdown of that's what I call social constructs of, the decimation. That's what I personally, my opinion, my stance is, if you cause destruction and you start breaking down familiar households, family units, you're going to cause traumas and you're going to cause abandonment issues within those family units. So, but most people don't really see that. And you can have, like, I was raised with two parents, but that did not mean I was not still feeling the abandonment issues or the rejection. They're still there. Even though your parents can be there, they're not quite there, are they? So I always say, just because you've got two parents doesn't mean you've got two parents. They may be there just because they don't want to leave for the sake of the children, but that doesn't mean the children can't feel the fact that that parent doesn't want to truly be there. So, God, I could really go on all day about how many ways you can create abandonment issues it just starts. So now you think about those parents when they grow up, they're probably dealing with abandonment issues themselves in one way or another. They're bringing that into their family. They're bringing that into how to raise their children, but they don't realize they're not quite healed. So they're making the same mistakes, even though they tell themselves, I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to raise my children differently to the way I was raised. But the underlying issue of abandonment issues, if it's still there and it hasn't been healed, they're going to creep in and seep in. And if you've got two parents with abandonment issues, that's all you're going to be allowing to seep into your children. They're going to feel it. Even though you're trying everything you can not to let that happen, your emotions, your energy, the way you act, the way you, depending if you're dealing with depression from it or anything like that, this is what your children are picking up on. So, I tend to say, like, abandonment issues do really tend to start from childhood. Now, what I found out as I was going into adulthood was my relationships, like again, because there was a trauma there anyway, within and what caused the low self-esteem and not very much confidence and things like that. And this is how it all really sort of starts into adulthood. You start attracting people with abandonment issues, or you are like a narcissist's wet dream. And remember, narcissists, right? Even depending on what levels or how many narcissistic traits they have, you're talking about they all have some level of abandonment issue. It's where it starts from. Traumas. They become the manipulators. They become the gaslighters. They become the very things that was raised into them, is what they had to grow up being. So I'm not saying this is a get out of a jail card for like narcissists, not at all. But you've got to understand, nobody's born a narcissist. It's the traits. People have different levels of narcissistic traits. We've all got those narcissistic traits in us. It's up to us to grow out of them, or snap out of them, or heal from them, or change the ways we do it. But some just go full-blown narcissists and can be very covertly about it too, and it's really disgusting. But they all have underlying issues they have not dealt with, which is the reason why I'm not talking about evil, because evil is choice. That's not a condition, right? People know right from wrong, regardless. Even narcissists know right from wrong. So I'm not talking about evil today. I'm talking about just even narcissists. It stems from their upbringing or what they're dealing with. Again, different levels of trauma. Different traumas will cause different levels of pain and different levels of issues, but they all need to be dealt with. So but when you have low self-esteem, not much confidence, and all you want to do is fit in, and I'm speaking from experience of what it was like growing up with abandonment issues, and then thinking it was normal to be a bit manipulative. Like, I even remember a former friend of mine, which is ironic really when I think about it, but a lot of people will commit infidelity because of their abandonment issues. Again, it's not an excuse, but it happens because they're not secure within themselves. And there's this weird manipulative, it's like this fight and flight mode in them. Like, well, if I don't do it first, that person's going to do it and then abandon me. And I've seen that firsthand. Like, I've looked at some of my friends. I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you cheating on your partner? Well, like, okay, no, I don't know. Why are you cheating on your partner? He's a good guy. He's a good woman. She's a good woman, regardless. And it's like, well, if I do it, they'll do it to me. And then I'm like, so that's a real cop-out excuse anyway, but that's only because of the issues that the person's dealing with. And those, when it comes to the infidelity, those are just abandonment issues. That's causing insecurity and low self-esteem. But then it's this incessant need for validation, so they'll go externally. They'll externally go outside of a relationship to get validation from other men or other women to make themselves feel good about themselves. And that's not a good recipe. That's not where the healing comes from. So, and depending if you're just physically cheating or you're emotionally cheating, well, again, that depends on your level of issues that you're dealing with. But there's a fear of, well, if I don't, I'm going to get abandoned anyway, so I may as well just sort of like live life and enjoy it. That's just a cop-out excuse. And that's why those patterns it's a pattern that you create. Unfortunately, we do. When you deal with abandonment issues, you're going to create a pattern of behavior for yourself. And that's exactly how it is. You've got to change the pattern to change the behavior to fix the issue. And then you start healing. but it's a process. It's a long time process. And then, like I say, this particular friend, I'm like, well, that's not a justification for. And then the person she was cheating with was domestically violent. And it's like, hang on a minute, how do you explain the bruises to your boyfriend, right? This is just an example I'm talking about. Well, sports, I'm like, so what happens if that guy beats you up too hard and kills you? How is that going to be explained to your boyfriend who's oblivious to you? And so there's there's like extreme levels of abandonment issues that cause this, but looking back at some people's past and beginnings, and you think, well, hang on a minute, where did your abandonment issue come from? Because you're from a loving home. But so you think, because you don't really know what's going on in someone's home as well. So you've got to take that into consideration. Now, my fight and flight was a little bit more survival. So I remember growing up, like, I need to eat today. Like, we were quite poor anyway. So I'm like, well, I need to have dinner. I need to eat. I need some food. So the neighbours would feel really sorry for me, stuff like that. Like, have you had any tea? Because they knew the circumstances. It wasn't just, there's a lot of families back then that were poor. Have you had any dinner, Karen? Tea, Karen? I'm like, no, I'm hungry. So you learn quite quickly how to survive, how to eat and survive. And so when you needed to, you would know how to manipulate the situation to survive. It's not something to be proud of. But when you're young and you're raised like that, you don't really know any other way until you learn, okay, that's not good. And when I really learned that was one of my not healthy traits, thank God I was still really young. Because I remember saying to this friend, well, that's that's extremely like deceitful. And she's like, well, what about you? You're manipulative. And I'm like, what? And again, it's being told what you are. And how you will tell little, like, hers were like, mine were little white lies back then, and little manipulative tactics just to survive. Hers were just full blown lies and deceit. So they were, even though we were both just as guilty in dealing with our abandonment issues, hers was just a bit more extreme. And I remember saying to her, well, what do you mean manipulative? I'm not manipulative. She went, yes, you are. You're quite a manipulative person. And I went, but then it shocked me because I thought, well, am I? But I didn't really understand what manipulation meant then. So I really sort of researched and like, oh my God, I am a little bit. That's not good. But then I realized, but that's only because I'm trying to survive. But I'm not purposely hurting anybody. I'm just more hurting myself more than anything. There's still no justification for it. It's just, you've got to understand and recognize the traits that you have and you carry when you're dealing with abandonment issues. So because even though she was a liar and a deceiver, she was still honest enough to highlight one of my not so good traits. And then I had to sort of question myself, like, I said, well, you know, what you're doing is for selfish reasons and selfish gain, right? And pleasure, whatever. Mine's not like that. Mine's because I need to survive. But it's still not a good reason, but it's the truth. So when you can admit the truth to yourself, then you can start fixing that and changing that. And then I quickly snapped out of that. Okay, this is not good. I don't like this. But then when you learn about fight and flight as you get older, you're like, oh God, I really wasn't like, my God, it was, you don't realize until you heal, until you change. And when you heal, why you're feeling those insecurities and abandonment issues. It's just admitting to yourself, well, it's not my fault. It's not my fault I was abandoned. It's not my fault I was rejected. They just didn't want me. They just didn't want to be around me, right? It's not nice to admit that, like, am I the problem? Is it me? Well, maybe partly of it was, but most of the time as a child, no, it's not the child's fault at all. It's usually the adult's fault. So, but remember, the adults are also dealing with abandonment issues. So that's all they really know. It's their pattern that they re-educate into the children. So I realized then I need to change this pattern, because otherwise I'm going to be a repetitive cycle, a generational cycle. And I could see, looking at my sisters, I'm like, okay, well, they're pretty much in the same. They've got different abandonment issues, but for different it's weird. You can have different abandonment issues for different reasons. even though you're all related and everything. It's really strange, but yeah. So I knew I needed to change the chain, break the chain, because otherwise I would have gone down the paths of addictions and things like that, which are very tempting and easy to do, just to sort of block it out and become numb to it. And I watched everybody around me go down those avenues, and I thought, you know what? And I snapped out of those anyway. So again, that's when you break the chain and you change the pattern, you change the habits of the routines and everything, and then you start sort of like thinking differently. And then you start learning how to like yourself, and then all of a sudden I was attracting these men, like these relationships where they had abandonment issues. So the relationships wouldn't last very long. Not because it was, not always because to do with me, because I would put all my all in, and that was my fault, my problem. Never give too much too quickly, because again, they're going to take it, but because they've got issues that they're dealing with, or different type of traumas and whatever else, or their abandonment issues, they're looking for an escape route, because that's their fight and flight mode. And it's like, okay, well, I'm giving my all, but they're just rejecting me and abandoning me and going to the next one. So I realized as I got older, okay, there's two types of abandonment products of people, right? So this is where it gets tricky, because this is where you've got to learn what category you fit in as a product of abandonment. You can either be the abandoner that you've been raised into, who's raised you, and become a professional victim and play that professional victim card, right? Where you'll become the abandoner and you will traumatize people, you will cheat on people, you will lie, you'll just play the manipulative cards, you will abuse people and you will hurt people because you're still hurt. Or you can be the product of the abandonment issues, right? Where you can go, okay, well, I've got to completely change. I've got to break away from all, and you got to remember, these people are also dealing with societal conditioning of programming too. So they're actually thinking it's cool to be like that, because when you're watching through the entertainment industry and music and everything, they're trying to tell you how cool it is to be an abuser. They're teaching how cool it is to be aggressive, to be manipulative, to be a lying, cheating deceiver, to step on people. So when you've got abandonment issues and all this kind of stuff going on, you're already still living through fight and flight mode constantly, you're not even at peace at all. And then you're programmed by this programming tool, right? And then through advertising and everything, through advertising, entertainment, and what, then that's feeding your narcissistic brain to add new narcissistic traits to your own little catalogue of you. And all of a sudden you've got all of these different traits going on, and you're implementing them into how to survive, how to go through life surviving, taking, manipulating, never at peace, never moving forward, just moving on to the next victim. And that's what professional victims do. They never move forward. They never really succeed. They can't. It's not possible, because they're never still for long enough. So the only thing they're really succeeding at getting is hurting people, leaving damaged people behind, or just getting monetary gain out of it. Or, and again, depending on whether you use your penis as a weapon or your vagina as a weapon, as a tool, you'll use that for your manipulative tactics too. That's just the way it is. I'm not going to sugarcoat the truth or reality of it. I've seen it firsthand. I know what is happening there, but I know the underlying cause of it is just abandonment issues. But they've got to be worked on. They're unhealed people. So it took me a long time to realize I've got some serious abandonment issues going on within me, because none of my relationships truly worked long enough. My marriage has ended, but then again, when you got to remember, when I was looking for a pattern, and that was the pattern that I was used to, but I finally snapped out of it. Like, hell no, no. The only way you can truly heal your abandonment issues and your childhood traumas and things like this is to go into complete I mean, I could have, because you become codependent and everything, and I'm guilty of that. I became codependent. I didn't know any other way. It was survival, fight and flight, always like codependency. I was guilty of that. But then I realized, how do I not become codependent? How do I become dependent, independent? And usually it's it just takes that one final blur to be, and unfortunately it was my second husband who left me for another woman. So after like 11 years of marriage, I mean, I didn't fight it. I said, no, if you're falling in love with somebody else, I'll release you from the marriage. And that's kind of how, because I knew I can't stay with somebody that doesn't want me. Because when you're growing up with abandonment issues, you learn as you grow, and you're constantly learning, like, I'm not the problem. I can only do so much. I can only give too much before. But if that person doesn't want me, nothing I do or how nice I am is going to keep that person. And that was just the sad reality of that, the ending of the marriage. But at the same time, it was like, well, this is where I can completely break that pattern once and for all, forever. And that was when I decided, well, okay, that's fine. I'll just, I'll be alone. Because you can't really change anything if you continue the pattern. So rather than find somebody else to be codependent on theirs, because I need to feel wanted, right? Or even me, my problem was I needed to feel needed. That gets me hurt. That gets me rejected, thrown away, stepped on and everything. I've learned to snap out of that crap, right? I know people who truly need me and need my help. I will always help them. You've got to be able to recognize that you're not always at fault. And even the abandoners are not completely at fault, but they have got to do the work. They've got to heal. They've got to fix the problem. They've got to get therapy. Because if you don't, right, the more you sort of continue that pattern, that destructive, because that is a destructive pattern anyway, that professional victim mentality, that is a destructive pattern. And to be perfectly honest, if I had to be completely real, because I'm a truth speaker and I say it as it is, there are only very few patterns. If you look at the statistics, just the other one, if you look at the statistics and you look at the motives and reasons as to why people get, it's not people's fault. I'm just saying it's really hard to, this is where it could trigger people, and I don't want to trigger people, but you've got to be very careful, because when you're in those manipulative, destructive mind frame, and that's how you function through life, right? And regardless of the issues at this point, if you're in that real destructive, manipulative, deceitful, vindictive energy, because that's all you have become, because of your underlying issues you haven't healed, you only have to cross paths with the wrong person that is going to not put up with any of that. And you don't even really truly know who you've crossed paths with. And you could have crossed paths with an absolute psychopath. And that destructive behavior that you're continuing to think, I can just survive this way, I can keep going this way, there's not always a good outcome. It's usually either prison, addiction overdoses, the hands of an absolute psychopath or a sociopath, or truly, unless you heal or get therapy and help, there's no real good outcome for it. Or you just end up like dying alone, because you don't know how to be in a fully functional, productive relationship with anybody, not just the opposite sex, a relationship with friends and everything. So you end up pushing everybody away, or they'll keep abandoning you because they won't deal with your crap. When they realize you're manipulating them and you're using them and you're slandering them and you're very toxic about them, especially behind their backs and things like that, people find out these eventually and they'll just reject you. So now you're just being re-abandoned because of your own behavior, and people don't like to admit that. Like, no way, that person just like rejected me. Who do they think they are? How dare they abandon me? Okay, well, you need to start working on your childhood abandonment issues right there, because that's a problem, right? Because you're not addressing, you're not asking yourself, why did that person abandon me? Why did they just reject me? And you're not telling people the truth. You're not telling people like, well, that person just rejected me and completely like cut me out of the life and everything. And then there's a little sub story because you're a personal victim. But then you're not telling the other people what you did or why. Because people don't just reject you for no reason. There's usually whether it's like their own like selfishness or, yeah, just like, I got to reject you because I've met somebody else. Okay. Well, that's not always the same scenario in every single situation. So I've done it myself. I've had to cut people, I've cut friends out of my life and I've got rid of them because of the behaviors, they're red flags. And it's like, and that's when you grow and you heal and you've got to do the work. You've got to do the shadow work. You've got to admit, this is where I'm screwing up. This is where I'm doing it wrong. This is where I'm making mistakes. And this is why these people are taking advantage of me. So, and when you realize this, when you can admit to yourself, I'm part of the problem, right? And then you ask yourself, and you go deep within, why am I part of the problem? Why am I acting like that? Why do I let people do this to me? Why do I do that to people? You've got to learn to be honest with yourself. And then it takes you on a journey to childhood. And that's usually because where it stems, and you've got to connect with your inner child. And I'm going to end this video about that because that's how far it has to take you to understand. So you go back to your past and you're like, well, okay, I remember feeling like that. I remember this same feeling scenario from my parents, maybe. I remember that, but that wasn't my fault. That's when you start realizing, hang on a minute, I was just a child. That was not my fault. That was out of my control. How could I be in control of that situation? I didn't abandon myself. And that's usually where the childhood traumas of those issues start creeping in. And then you start recognizing them and go, you know, I'm sorry. I've got to forgive myself. You know, I've got to just walk away from that. I can't be blaming myself in the depths of me for what was done to me. That's the thing. You've got to make sure you recognize that. Then you start learning to have a relationship with yourself. And sometimes you've got to isolate from people. The fastest way to heal any abandonment issues from any person or rejection problem issues and stuff like that is to isolate from every single person. Because you can't figure out what the real issue is. You can't really learn to have a relationship with you if you're too distracted by external people that are implementing and inflicting their own abandonment issues onto you. And you're like, well, I'll just receive them all. I'll take them all in because I got them myself and I recognize and I resonate. I resonate with that manipulative crap. I resonate with those little white lies and I know how far they can go if you don't control that crap. I know if I go, oh, okay, those addictions, I can see if I resonate with that. That's why I got out of all that crap. These are the paths you'll continue to go down again over and over and over again. It's a repetitive cycle. You've got to break the pattern. And none of those people around you can do it for you. You've got to do it yourself. And depending on what sort you're dealing with or what sort of trauma you're dealing with or what maybe mental health problem you have to see the right type of specialist to deal with that. So you need to seek therapy too. If you need it, you need to go and get help. Because if you don't, it will be the destruction of you and it will be a destruction to your soul. Your soul is everything. It's very important. So, and part of like recognizing and analyzing and looking at everything is you need to self-isolate from everyone and just start to learn a little bit more about, well, what kind of person am I? Who am I really? Who am I? Then you start learning about yourself. Then you start remembering who you are before you were distracted by external narcissists and sociopaths and everybody else everybody's got issues. There's nobody on this planet walking around without some sort of issue going on, right? It's not possible. That programming machine will never allow it to be possible. When we're programmed by an evil system, we're all going to have some sort of issues. Some are just going to be worse than others. But again, depending on what people go through and depending on traumas and things like this, will be the reason they'll have more to deal with. So nobody's completely, and I say this all the time, nobody's immune from traumas. It doesn't matter whether you're from the so-called perfect family or you've got the perfect relationship or perfect marriage. There's no such thing. I don't care what people want to say on social media. I don't care what about this fake crap. Like, oh, look at my perfect family. BS. You're probably very toxic. One of you, between you or your husband or vice versa, change the roles, one of you is incredibly toxic. And the one that's trying to control the narrative of a great relationship is probably the controller, and that's the problem with people with abandonment issues. They are very controlling. They need to control everything. But they'll create the fake facades as well to pretend it's okay. Look at my Band-Aid. You got to rip that Band-Aid off and you got to do the work, the inner work, the shadow work. And in order to create this like fake, look at my fake family, look at my fake perfect family. No. All I can see when I look at those fake videos and pictures is, oh my God, those poor children are getting absolutely raised by a narcissist. Or, well, that parents, or maybe both or one or the other's got serious abandonment issues, and you can tell because they need to control everything about it. They need to control when you smile, you will smile for this cat. And then you got like, and depending on whether the spouse or the partner is like just as bad as that person or the victim, like of that person. Because if you don't change and you don't heal these abandonment issues, you're going to become a ferocious controller. Before you know it, you'll become an abuser. And unfortunately, that is the reason why domestic violent households are on the rise, and the biggest, well, no, not the biggest, but a high rate in the data of abusers now today over the past 10 years, especially, is women on men. But men will never admit that because of their pride. So the statistics are rising because the women that have been the victims have become the abusers. This is what I'm talking about. You have to heal. You have to get help. Because if you don't, you'll become the very thing that hurt you. You won't see it. You're not going to go into it intentionally, but you will naturally become it. That is a really bad path. That's what I'm saying. There's no good outcome if you don't fix your issues. And usually those do tend to start from abandonment issues because it causes major insecurities and this incessant need for validation, or you want to care, but your partner or etc. is one's going to be worse than the other. You're going to attract a like attract. Like people, oh, my fan. People have seeking out what they resonate with, what they know. They're seeking out their own energy signature. And just, unfortunately, you grab hold of the energy signature you resonate with, one might just be 10 times worse than the other. So that is why a lot of domestic violence, relationship violence, abuse is on the rise, because people are going into these new relationships and being codependent, trauma bonding. Instead of healing, they are trauma bonding. And then, but that also tells me, like, a lot of people, if they are getting help, if they actually are getting therapy and it's not working and they're coming, then there's a breakdown in that system too, which is why I don't trust it. But that's only my opinion. I have my own reasons why I don't trust it. So, but that's why I chose to heal myself, just do all of the hard work, which is why it's taken so much longer. And I'm not saying therapy is a bad thing. I'm just saying it's needed. People need it. But that does not mean I necessarily trust it all. Like, divorce can cause abandonment issues. I mean, I've seen that. I know what that's like myself. I know what that's like. I know it can traumatize people. And it's interesting because, like, I remember my first marriage, I abandoned that marriage. That's only because I found out he'd been cheating on me, and I was really shocked. And I found out from a close source to him, like, if I can't trust my ex-husband, I'm going to trust this person because they're the wingmen, sort of thing. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, so when I get told, yeah, unfortunately, I'm like, whoa, the whole dynamics of the marriage just broke down. Then not to mention the fact that when we finally got a house and stuff like that, he moves 2 lap dancers in. I don't think so. Major red flags, right? So yeah, I had every right to abandon that marriage. And so, but that doesn't mean it didn't affect him. But at the same time, I was only able to feel sorry for him to an extent, because it was like, hang on a minute, where was your feelings towards me when you were cheating on me? And secondly, making me live with lap dancers and strippers. I don't think so. Walking around the house practically naked. That's not a marriage. I didn't choose that. That wasn't the deal. So there's things like that, like, what did you care about my feelings? No. So there's things that you will stop allowing, and then when you start healing, you will start putting up healthy boundaries. But that did not mean by abandoning that first marriage, didn't hurt him. Of course it hurt him. It hurt us both. It hurt me too, because I actually felt like a failure, but in more ways than one. And like, okay, what did I do wrong? Okay, not much. I mean, I can't stop someone cheating on me. You can't stop a person cheating on you. They're going to cheat. They're going to cheat, whether it's a man doing it or a woman doing it. They're going to cheat. You can be the most beautiful woman on the planet, or the most amazing man on the planet with everything, rich and everything. But if that woman wants to cheat, she's going to cheat. So it doesn't matter. It's just people have problems, people have issues, but they have to address those. They have to get help. They have to heal themselves. But most don't want to, because the unfortunate thing about this lazy society we live in today is there's too much choice. There's no true fidelity. There's no loyalty. I'd be surprised. I can't even remember the last time I met. I still have one loyal person in my life, and that's my best friend. The people I've met along the way, there's no loyal bones in their bodies. And again, in order to change the patterns so you don't keep falling into the same trap with your own abandonment issues and things like this, is you have to look at the red flags. And when you put those healthy boundaries up, you have to look at the red flags. I mean, I see I've got former friends who don't, I've had to get rid of them, because it starts with a small red flag, like, did you seriously just disrespect me? And if you allow it, it's like, okay, if I allow that, that's going to give you permission to keep treating me the way you are. Just thinking of a quick scenario. I remember temporarily living with an ex-friend, and I thought the friendship was really cool, and circumstances were exactly nice, having to sort of like live under the same roof as my friend. But I remember staying there, and I'm not one of those people. I'm not a lazy person. So if I'm someone's guest, I will clean that house. I will do everything. I will cook if I have to, and everything. If I can't pay, I will make sure I'm contributing. That's just the way I was raised. But I remember the dynamics of staying there one night, and the routine and everything, and like just trying to respect the routine and stay quiet, blah blah blah. But I remember how busy the routine was with the family in the morning, how loud it was, and it's like, well, I can't say anything about it. It's not my problem, because it's not my house, and I can't have an issue with it. I'm just a guest here. But then, and I thought, well, I've just got to accept that until I found my own place. And then I remember one night she was introducing me to another friend who was staying the night, and so we was really getting on. But the major red flag for me was the next morning, I thought, okay, I'm here, and that other woman's at that side, so she's going to have her here. It's going to get noisy. So, and early in the morning too. And I thought, well, we're both going to be dealing with how noisy it gets around here. No, my friend made sure her children did not make one noise. She didn't even turn a light on or make coffee or anything, right? All just so she didn't wake the other friend up. But didn't have a problem with me. That's where you've got to understand different levels of disrespect people can have for you, and you don't realize until you see it. And I thought, hang on a minute, just because I'm a guest, you don't think I deserve the same level of respect as that? And it's something so small. Now, I could have said not. Well, I didn't say anything. I just thought, no, I'm going to push harder at finding my own place right now, because I'm not going to, no, that's just, it was so disrespectful that it made me realize I can either say nothing and allow that behavior to continue, and I am not going to, then I start feeling bad because I'm a guest, and, you know, I didn't ask there to be that disrespectful. I didn't ask anybody to be quiet or anything like that. It's just something you would kind of want to do, right? Because if somebody was staying at my home and I was a very, very early bed, which I am, I would not, I just show that person respect. Like, I'm just going to be really quiet as I can be, right? And try and hope that. But there's a different levels of, when you're not treated the same way and disrespectfully than the way they treat other people, that is a huge red flag. You've got to see that for what it is. And I did. And I was like, oh no, you know, no, you have no respect for me as your friend. So this friendship is going to end. And I'm going to make this as painless as possible. I'm not going to give you drama. I'm not going to create a fuss. I'm just going to quickly find my own place immediately and get back on top of being independent, because, you know, nobody should have to nobody should be in a situation where they're homeless, right? And then have to be disrespected too, just because, no, I don't think so. No way. So that's how it felt. That was, and again, there's always like, there's clearly like two sides to a story, but then there's the truth. But the reality was, I saw the red flag immediately and I thought, well, I can continue to just say nothing. And because I'm feeling a bit dependent right now because of my living situation, I can allow this behavior to continue, or I can get proactive and change this dynamic immediately, because I can't accept that. I would never treat anybody like that. So I'm not going to have that done to me. And that's where you can start falling into the cycles again. And I changed that. And as soon as I found a new place, I was like, you know, thank you for everything. I appreciate it. But, you know, I didn't say the friendships ever. I just weeded them out. You've got to, I don't like conflict. It's not always necessary. I will not tolerate it. I don't like conflict because it's not healthy. But if you can't, you just sometimes got to weed people out, like, just got to block them. That's it. So yeah, it wasn't a nice thing to do, but yeah. And it wasn't just that situation. There was other things like slagging me off in front of me in a foreign language. Like, just because you're with your friends who speak a different language to me and I can't understand it, you think I don't read body language. You don't think I don't read energy, but yet you're insulting me to your friends in a foreign language. That's about as disrespectful as it gets. But again, that won't be their version of the story. But unfortunately, you've got to be, that's the reality. You've got to accept it and know what it's like. Hang on a minute. I can't accept, just because I can't speak their language doesn't give them the right to insult me or slag me off behind my back or in front of me, thinking that I can't understand. I read energy. You think telepathy is a universal language. Just because I can't understand the language doesn't mean I can't read the body language and the energy. So people forget that too about me. People mistake my kindness for weakness. That is their fault. That is their undoing. And then, like, again, I'm always looking for, I treat people with absolute respect and I treat with kindness and everything. That's the way I am. So when I've made other friends along the way, and it's like I've had to get rid of a bunch of people because their energy, I want to give you a tip. If you're ever in your group of friends, right, and everyone's laughing and joking, and then all of a sudden the energy changes, right, and you'll feel it. You might feel a bit paranoid, but you'll feel it, right? You'll feel like, I just feel like I got kicked in the gut. And what's going to happen is your intuition's like kicked in, like, there's something you need to see here, or something you need to be listening or hearing. And then all of a sudden you'll naturally just gravitate towards the problem. And I've done it myself. I've been sat at a table on a night out with a group of girls, and she's two at the end of the table and having a great night. And all of a sudden the energy changed. They changed the energy on the table, and I pick up an energy. I read energy, and I caught them slagging me off, whispering, but looking directly at me. So obviously my energy was like zoom in. I'm like, and but I remember saying out loud, you do realize I can read energy, right? And it changed the whole dynamics of that table, and it changed the energy. And even though it took me about 10 minutes and I had to fake it, like, I can't believe. But how I feel about those two people changed in an instant. I had zero respect for them. It just went like, no. You're not good people. So, and even though I knew their backgrounds, that's not a justification for no. I don't accept it and I won't anymore. So you've got to be that ferocious. You've got to be that tough. When you change and you heal your problems, you do not have to accept other people's. You get rid of them. So within weeks, that was one of the first red flags. And then there was some manipulative tactics going on for a few more weeks, and I monitor them and I'm like, okay, now I know where the problem areas are, and the main problem area, I'll monitor it for a few more weeks. And then when then I had me, obviously doing what I do, it's a bit different, but I had the predictions and everything of what was going to happen next. And when it did, I'm like, you got to go. And that's when you've got to, again, you weed them out. And then once you weed them out, you block them. You do not have to have people like that in your life. They are destructive. And secondly, you'll become the the bad guy, the bad girl. You'll be they're the professional victims, remember, but they're the ones with the abandonment issues too. So I also take that into consideration, like, well, I've got to get rid of these people. I've got to reject them, knowing they've got abandonment issues and childhood abandonment issues. Well, tough shit, right? I don't have to put up with that. But you've just got to go into it knowing what's going to come from that. Slander campaigns, lies, gossip and everything. Like, you'd be amazed at how much you'll become a target of their vengeance because they can't handle their emotions. They can't handle their abandonment issues. That's the problem. That's where it can get a bit, so at that point, you isolate and you just stay away from them. You don't get involved in it. You don't react to it. If the people around you want to believe them, they're going to anyway. Don't even worry about it. Just stay in your lane at that point. Stay away from them, because these people can become very vicious, and depending on what else they've got going on, yeah. So you will be the villain in their story, but they will never tell everybody why. They'll never give them the vet. There's always no. So remember that when you start healing from your own abandonment issues. And I'm just giving you a few examples of what you will be up against and how you will recognize it as you heal. Like, oh, God, if I wasn't healed, I would have tolerated that. I would have continued to tolerate that. If I wasn't as healed as I am now, I would have continued to tolerate that behavior and be the butt of their jokes and their slant and their and whatever they're plotting. I don't think so. Or then you become no. These professional victims are unhealed. And then when you heal and you work and you've got to isolate to do it, and you start having a relationship with yourself again, this is also what will trigger the people with abandonment issues. The moment you heal your childhood traumas and your abandonment issues, you're going to start having a relationship with yourself. You're going to start liking yourself again. And when you start liking yourself, you start increasing your self-esteem, right? You start raising when you start really liking yourself, then you start to love yourself. And when you start loving yourself, it emanates from you. You emanate a completely different energy. It's very high vibrational, because that's what love is. It's very high vibrational and self-love. And it triggers everybody else around you that's unhealed. Like, who do they think they are? Well, a healed version of what I was. That's who they are. And that's what these people, and then they don't like it. So they've got another problem going on that you're going to have to deal with as a self-loving, healed person. You're going to have to deal with the people who are unhealed and jealous, and they get very vindictive and bitter about it too. So you've got to expect it. But that does not mean you need to stray off your lane. You just stay in your lane, do what you need to do, and keep moving forward. And then as you keep going forward, you'll keep healing, right? And you won't be triggered anymore. You won't even you'll control your emotions, so that emotional maturity really like kicks in, and you're like, wow, I didn't even react to that. I'm growing here. I'm growing. Right? But because they're triggered and they're not able to control their emotions, they start to show their true colors. And that's why you've got to stay away from them, but just stay in your lane so you don't get dragged into it. And that's unfortunate, but that's what it's like in society today. You've got to recognize it and only heal you. Don't be worrying about everybody else. That if they're not ready to deal with their own issues and stuff like that, That's not your problem. You can't help them. You cannot heal them. You can try and help them for a certain period of time, but they're not going to heal. They have to want to do it themselves. And like I'm telling you, most people don't want to. It's hard work. Nobody wants to go deep within them and do that shadow work because you have to isolate, which means you have to be alone to do it. And most people don't know how to be alone, especially when you've got major issues going on, because a lot of these people are codependent on each other. How can they learn to be alone when they're codependent? How can they learn to be alone and enjoy their alone time when they need people around them for validation? It's a lot harder for some people. But that doesn't mean it has to be hard for you. You're not them and they are not you. You've got to just live your life. And if you have to lose a lot of people along the way, so be it. You'll make other people along the way too. But when you start to have an amazing relationship with yourself and you start loving yourself, you're going to realize quite quickly, why do you really need me? Everybody else in the future that I come across that's really cool and good, that'll be a bonus. But then you'll be able to go through life very independently. There's nothing wrong with being an independent woman or an independent man at all. There's nothing wrong with being alone. That's just what society program tells you. It's weird. It's not weird. It's not weird. It's dysfunctional to be around people that are too codependent, and they will literally just bring you down to their level, and you'll never heal. You need to be healed. What happens if you're unhealed? Unhealed people with issues are feeding a system. Think about the system in so many areas: therapy, advertising, cosmetic surgery, everything, right? Everything. Who funds all of those areas? Unhealed people. Now, can you imagine being unhealed and realizing you don't really need much and you don't really need to follow you're not part of the sheep or anything like that. You're not really paying into much of any of that at all. So then all of those systems, imagine if everybody woke up and realized that, advertising would just collapse overnight, right? Screw that crap, right? Because it's evil. Because it's what's programmed from it. So you've got to understand how, and you do learn a lot more as well as you start healing and snapping out of the societal norms. Then you become quite stoic too. And when you start disciplining yourself to stay in your lane and just live the way you want to live, you'll have a real stoicism about you too. And now I'm just like a Sigma female, so it's like, I don't need anybody. I'm quite happy alone. Thank you very much. There's no drama. And there's many reasons why, there's other reasons why I'm a Sigma female, but you will become that sort of like stoic. And no one's going to start messing with your disciplines that you implement into your own life. You're not going to let anybody in and to like start unbalancing all those. You're going to get out. Plus you're going to see the red flags and you'll be like, oh, I'm good, thanks. I'm happy, thank you. And it shows. You don't need to lie or fake it or manipulate it anymore. You don't even need to put out a white lie out there anymore. It shows. And that also annoys unhealed people. And that is a sad reality, but that's the truth. So I want to finish off what it's like. And this is emotional because this is where you've really healed your sort of childhood traumas. It's really sort of tapping into yourself. This takes hard work though. And you've got to be ready to be emotional. But there's different levels. Like I have this tattoo on my back. It's a triquetra. And it's a Celtic triquetra. Now the triquetra is it means 3 stages of a woman or the 3 stages of a person, the changes of whether a man or a woman, but it's childhood, adolescence, and then maturity. So that's what the triquetra signifies for me. Childhood traumas, the adolescence of understanding and learning and making the mistakes, but then the adult version, you start correcting the mistakes and you start healing, and it's a continuous triangle cycle. It's a triquetra. So once you go through those 3 stages of changes, because that's what the triquetra really signifies, changes. It's not the whole like witchcraft crap that is programmed into you. It's not like just because it looks like a book of shadows in witchcraft book on the charmed or any. No. People look at the triquetra and go, "Whoa, that's very witchcrafty." It's nothing to do with witchcraft. It's the ignorance of people today but that's what's programmed into your brain. You see something and think, oh, that's what it signifies. It means nothing of the sort. You got to. Most people don't understand the true meanings of what they're being fed into their brains at all. It's like really embarrassing. But that's the ignorance of them for not researching or learning. So, but yeah, the triquetra is literally the changes. It's about, to me, it's the 3 stages of a woman, of what I signify that for. But it's, everything's sort of interconnected. So, and I chose to get the Celtic version because I'm representing my sort of Celtic ancestry line too, where I feel like and that's the other thing. When you sort of start working on all the traumas and things like this, and generational traumas and ancestral traumas, that you remember them in your next life, if you understand what I'm talking about. But I brought all that to service, and I felt like I wasn't just like breaking the chain, like, of my family unit, my bloodline, and breaking those chains of the repetitive cycles. I felt like I was the first one to break the repetitive cycle of a generational line. And I feel like, and because it goes right back to my Celtic side, I'm like, so for when I really conquered all of that, that's why I really got the triquetra when I was quite young, like in my 30s. So I understood the changes and how I was changing and everything. And along the way, even though I was having to deal with new adult traumas, I was conquering them too. Rather than let them fester and set in, I was conquering them. And that's, so when I think about the triquetra, I went right back to the adolescent side, and I'm like, okay, I made a lot of mistakes in that period. But what did I learn as an adult? Everything. I learned about everything. But then in order to really accept the changes and how much I learned, I had to go back to being the child. And just to, I mean, I do it for regression, self-regression, but I had to really go back to my child in me, the 5-year-old Karen that I first remember, how the problem started when I understood, oh, and then when I was 7, I realized, oh God, there's a lot more to this world too. So I was dealing with 2 different conflicts in my family, unfortunately. I was dealing with the issues in the physical household at a very early age. Being 5, I remember it. But 7, I remember I was dealing with like energy and understanding like in dimension. Well, I didn't know there were dimensions then, but understanding energy. And so I was like, okay, well, that felt like, to be honest, what I was dealing with, the energy, because I was helping energy and I was assisting energy, that was an amazing sort of like outlet for me anyway. So I was able to learn a lot more. There was a lot more wisdom coming from that too, which probably helped me mature quite quickly. So, but I just remember going back to my childhood, like 5-year-old Karen, and just sort of like seeing the fringe and everything and really regressing back there and having to tell the child inside me, none of this bullshit is your fault. This is just what you had to deal with as a child. But look at what you became. And I can't even explain what it's like to show you in the child who you've become. And I feel him. It's really emotional. And I can feel him. I can still see it when I go back, but I can't explain how much it makes you realize that you've healed everything, that you've healed abuse, you've healed traumas, you've healed your inner child. To look at the child, your inner child, and remember, and then hug that little version of you and say, it's okay, you made it. And look what you became. And that, I would love everybody to have that. But it's hard work. You've got to do a lot of hard work. And there's no blame. Like, you can't go back and blame what's my parents' fault, because you don't know what they were dealing with. You don't know how they were truly raised. And you don't know what their parents, Because that's what I call a generational curse, I guess. Like, you've just got to learn to be the one that breaks that patterns, breaks those traumas, heal, because it starts within you. And then don't hate them, you just forgive them. Because remember, just because they were part of the reason why you were broken doesn't mean you can't fix you. And if you need extra help and more help and psychological help, you need to go and get that. But then one day you will wake up and realize who you become after you've healed is you, your strength, and everything you've done and implemented to heal your journey literally shapes and defines you. And it's only when you get to that point, then you truly go back to the child within you and show that child, look, you survived. You're not, it's okay. You don't have to hurt anymore. We've broken the chains. We've broken the curse. You can, whatever you want to call it. We've broken the pattern. And it ends. You can't expect your siblings to do the same journey, but you can be the one that breaks the patterns and the chains. But it's hard work. It's a journey. It took me 48 years. So, and now I would love it if people could understand that and take that journey, because however long I've got left on this planet, I have peace. I have pure peace. I'm happy inside. I'm independent. I have so much love to give, but in the future, I'm going to be very careful about where I implement that love and who I give it to. I'm never going to stop being a healer, because I am a healer within me, but I'll also help people heal. I'm a healer of the ages. Of course I am. I help people heal, and I help people educate on how to continue that healing process, but that can be an individual sort of plan when I'm working with a client. It's a little bit different, but for me, I've always had this need to feel needed. Like if I heal somebody and I help somebody, it does. There's a part of that helps me heal me. Because if I can help to heal a broken part of somebody, just a tiny part of somebody, and I've helped them, and that helps heal that broken side of me. It makes me feel like I'm useful and I'm here for a reason. So, but you never stop getting emotional, right? You've got to be emotional. You've got to feel. You've got to feel. And when you do take the healing journey, the self-healing journey, you're going to cry a lot. You've got to release it. You've got to release it all without blaming others. It's just, we know, again, there are people that did this to you. But if you can't forgive them, just forgive you for making it and surviving it. Just forgive you for having to deal with it. But it didn't define you, did it? And again, if you do need specialized help, you've got to get that help too. But the healing journey, once it gets rid of all the addictions. Everything that's bad in your life, you'll get rid of it. You'll heal it all and you won't need it. And you won't do it. You'll just live differently. You'll think differently. And that's a beautiful thing about a self-healing journey, is you get rid of everything. And you realize what's good for you, who's good for you, who's not good for you. You can't start a healing journey with dysfunctional people around you that are not ready to heal themselves yet. You can't. It's not their fault, but they've got to do the work. They've got to do the healing. And the moment you start also doing the healing and you start really, and you know it's changing you, the narcissist won't come near you as much, because you'll see them and you'll give them a look and they'll be like, oh God, no, she's not, I can't victimize her anymore. Or no, she's not the right victim I'm looking for. They're just looking for victims. And there's plenty of professional victims out there that are ready to just jump on those little bandwagons with them and then continue the professional victim mentality. Well, I was abused by another one. Got to do the healing. It's not people's fault that they're abused, but you've got to see the patterns. You've got to change the patterns so you don't keep falling into another pattern of the same scenario. Nobody wants to be abused, good Lord. Nobody wants to be hurt or anything or traumatized. Nobody does. But if we don't heal, we're not going to recognize those people are out there in the shadows waiting for us to get closer so they can pound us and go, I'm going to tell you everything you want to hear. And then before we know it, we're in a cycle of abuse again. And we're like, how did I get there? I thought it was healing. Well, there was probably still something that wasn't quite. But eventually you'll just be like, I don't think so. You'll just look at them and go, get back in the shadows where you belong, little monster. Go and get therapy because you need it. And you've got to be that tough. And you will be assertive as shit. You've got to be. We are surrounded by a lot of narcissists in society today. And you've got to put them right in their place where they belong. And you do not let them into your energy or into your life. And if you do end up with another one, you just got to pray and hope that you can quickly get out of it as quickly as possible with limited damage control as you can. It's that ferocious, unfortunately. But you will sort of see the flags anyway and the signs, because that's the education of the healing journey. So I hope that, I'm just feeling I've got this fan in my face and the energy all around me. It's beautiful. But I hope I was able to sort of help people just speak truthfully. Like, you cannot play the professional victim card for too long. It will eventually catch up to you. You've got to admit as well, you can be part of the problem. You're probably the problem. And then you can heal and fix it. It's okay any problem can be fixed. Even yourself. But because you're a professional victim does not give you the right to go around hurting another human being, abusing another human being at all. No, not at all. And if you truly believe that, you're not even close to healing. You're not even close to accepting that you're the problem. So, and unfortunately, being a professional victim will only get you what it is that you get for so long. Eventually, you're going to have to deal with the reality of it. And like I said earlier, there's not always a great outcome for most people that continue on that path, because you will end up coming across, you cross paths with somebody that is 10 times worse than you, and you don't want to be their victim, because then you'll realize how bad you were to others, and you realize, no, is this my karma? It's just accountability as well. It's okay to have these issues, but you've got to heal, you've got to get help, so you don't become a victimizer or an abuser and then fall into the hands of a real evil, who knows how evil they are. Become a final victim yourself. Don't fall into that. Got to change those patterns immediately. So if any of that truth has helped any of you, just to help you start at least a healing journey, then I hope that it does. And I just send big love to you all. Other than that, take care, and I'll see you all again very soon.